What was the TPP has become the CPTPP. But what's changed? The addition of the words comprehensive and progressive, obviously. We don't miss a trick. The US has withdrawn under President Donald Trump, but the criticisms that led many thousands of people to stretch the length of Queen Street in February 2016 protesting against the TPP, have they been addressed? Winston Peters, who opposed the TPP, now supports it. Many of you would have heard him telling Guyan on Morning Report this morning that the revised agreement contains substantial changes. So this morning I asked Trade Minister David Parker, who's in London, to explain to the people who protested in the streets against the TPP what is different.
I think the people who were in the streets protesting a couple of years ago were there for a number of reasons. There's a lot of people feel insecure as a consequence of the changes brought about by globalisation, a lot of which we can't control. A lot of people realise there's so many jobs changing as a consequence of automation and robots and other technological change. Then there are other people who think, look, I don't feel that it's right that multinationals don't pay tax anywhere in the world or very low rates of tax. And then there are still other people who say, I don't like being outbid to buy a house in my own country by someone from overseas. And I think that the most beautiful bays in the Bay of Islands ought to be purchased by New Zealanders rather than by a very wealthy person from overseas. And there are still other people who say there are clauses in trade agreements that they think that go too far to protect the rights of overseas investors, including these so-called ISDS clauses. So there's a lot of reasons behind it, and some of them are valid.
I covered that huge march through central Auckland, and I spoke to dozens of people. And I guess in very broad terms, the issue that people were concerned about was sovereignty being lost through unfettered access to New Zealand, through the loss of the sort of Farm Act model because of the powers of Big Pharma, because of the ISDS provisions. How has CPTPP responded to those concerns about TPP?
Well, for me, the most important sovereignty issue is being able to control who buys homes in your own houses. And we were told at the time when the TPP was going through that we had to choose as a country between being able to be in free trade agreements and being able to control who owns our houses. And of course, in the Labour Party and the coalition with New Zealand First, with the support of the Greens, we've proven that we can actually have both because we're legislating for that very outcome at the moment. But in respect of ISDS clauses, that is another curb on sovereignty. And so the idea that a foreign corporation could sue the New Zealand government when dissatisfied with a government contract or a government regulation in an international tribunal rather than through the New Zealand courts is something that offends people. And so I think that's a valid complaint, particularly when you're dealing with first world countries who respect property rights and have non-corrupt court systems themselves. And that's why as a government the Labour governments reversed the earlier position and said we're now opposed to ISDS clauses. The next question is what have we achieved in TPP in respect of ISDS clauses? And the outcome there isn't perfect, but it's better than it was. We have narrowed their ambit. The last version of the agreement, for example, if you had disputes between the government and an overseas contractor building the Waterview Tunnel, they could have sued the government if they were in dispute through an international tribunal. Now they can't. They've got a contractual dispute to sue the government through the New Zealand courts. We've narrowed the number of countries to whom these ISDS provisions apply to through side letters with Australia and various other countries who bilaterally agree with us that they will never use the ISDS provisions in the TPP agreement. But it is true that in a minor way they apply.
You say side letters with Australia and other countries, plural. Australia, of course, is very much a matter of public record, that side letter. So what other countries have you got this bilateral agreement with?
Australia's the most important one because that's the largest source of foreign direct investment into New Zealand. I can't disclose the other ones yet because we actually haven't got them finalised, but we expect them to be finalised in the next couple of months. But there are more than one. The other point I would make is that there is concern amongst some people that, if you introduce sort of plain packaging for cigarettes that you will be sued. You can't be sued for that. Some people are concerned that if you have environmental regulation or change to tax rates, or health and safety laws, you can be successfully sued. I'm absolutely confident that those things are well protected under the clauses which protect the right of the New Zealand government to regulate, as is the ability to run a public health system, a public education system, to properly fund SOEs. So, the residual risk arising out of the part of the ISDS clauses that we cannot get rid of, which we wanted to get rid of, is, we think, balanced by the advantages of being able to sell more goods and services to overseas countries, which supports New Zealanders' jobs and incomes.
David Parker talking to me from London this morning.